Hey, are we going to get Papa Vicente joining us today or what?
Perhaps he may join in, and if he does, we'll be ready to go when he does.
I got a comment on YouTube from the last one. They're like, hey, you know, Vicente added a little bit of flavor to the mix. I'm like, all right, cool. Well, let's get him back on. You know, we had these rule changes. Me and you know, when stuff gets interesting, leaders stand up and everything rises and falls on leadership, right? So as leaders in the Elite Builders organization, me and you started to have conversations. Last weekend, we did a live stream on it. I did a live stream on Monday. I got all the team together. We had 80 agents on a call, having a conversation about how we got here, what are the actual rule changes, and then specifically what we need to be augmenting in terms of approach, right? Both on the seller side and the buyer side. And I know me and you really pride ourselves on giving people the good shit, not the bullshit, and giving them actual tangible tools that they can use right in the marketplace. So let's kind of have a conversation first so everybody has clarity around the 5 different actual proposed rule changes, because they haven't actually gone into effect yet. We're going to operate under the assumption that they are going to go into effect. So let's talk about those 5 different rule changes. Then we can talk about specifically what we need to do as far as augmenting kind of approach, or what we're doing both on the sell side and on the buy side. Because I believe that for those who can pivot, who are highly skilled, they will continue to get their unfair share and continue to make, you know, a meaningful amount of money. The first proposed rule change is that we can no longer put compensation in the multiple listing service. And what was interesting, Jose, I was having a conversation with a coaching client of mine who does both residential and commercial. And he's like, yeah, dude, on all my commercial deals, I have to call the listing agent, find out what they're offering compensation. Then I do an LOI, a letter of intent. And in there, I include the compensation that I want. So I'm like, okay, so explain to me how this is different. He's like, it's not. It's the exact same thing. So we can still offer compensation. We just can't put it there.
Not only that, but I've already actually, like, for some reason, I thought, like, hey, this is likely not going to start coming up. I've actually had 2 conversations about it already in the last 2 days. So it actually came up with 2 different sellers, and both of the sellers were like, yeah, we want to offer compensation to the other side, because if not, nobody's going to want to show the listing. And it was just like, it was very well received, basically. So I think in some cases, and this is not to talk down on it, but I think we're making a bigger deal about it than it actually is.
I agree. 100%. And because I know that we're emotional beings so we think that we're thinking beings that feel when we're really feeling beings that think.
Yeah.
And the only reason why people would be kind of scared here is 2 reasons. One is knowledge equals confidence and ignorance equals fear. If I'm unclear on what's actually happening, I understand how you could, you know, be afraid. The second is that you're afraid that the marketplace is going to reveal that you don't add that much value. So that's the second reason why someone, you know, would have fear. So it's come up for you. You've had conversations, been very well received, and we're going to go through very specifically how that conversation goes, right? Yeah. So you can, instead of defending, which I think a lot of agents are doing, I'm seeing a lot of emotional posts of defending, like I'm worth it, and you know, this and that. Instead, what we should be doing is explaining and teaching the economics of the situation, and also the advantages and disadvantages of offering out compensation, right? Yeah. So we'll go over that, and then we'll go over kind of, you know, listing buyers, because that's one of the rule changes as well. Another rule change is that they're going to eliminate all the fields in the multiple listing service that allow you to put some form of compensation, because us as agents, we are very crafty, okay? We have a lot of, you know, ingenuity, and we will figure out a way around it. So they're just going to remove all fields in the multiple listing service where you can put that. The number 3 change is that we can put concessions in the multiple listing service. So in the broker's remarks, we could say, hey, with an acceptable offer, with an agreed, and again, we're not attorneys. We're just kind of, you know, on the fly, having done a bunch of transactions, probably 3,000 between me and Jose and counting. You know, with an acceptable offer, the seller agrees to provide a concession and then just be quiet. You know, me and you had a conversation about, you know, being very cautious or specific with regards to that language, so that way it doesn't cause confusion or something of that nature. The fourth thing
I think concession is the right word as well too. I also think that if basically listing agents take that approach where they just add that in the private remarks. It signifies to the other agent saying, oh, like this is a listing that's actually providing compensation, which if they are providing compensation, very little changes basically from, it's still the same thing. Like you're submitting what you can text the listing agent, ask what they're paying out on this one and submit an offer on it, and you'll get paid that same amount basically.
Yeah. Easy peasy. So that's that fourth rule change. And then the fifth, I think that's the third. The fourth rule change is that a seller can still offer compensation. You can. You're just not allowed to put it in multiple listing service. So you can.
They can still offer compensation?
Oh my God, yes, they can. I don't know if anybody knows this shit, but they can still offer compensation. Okay? And we just aren't able to put it in MLS. So where we could put it is when agents call and talk to us or our staff, we can let them know. We can also have a separate landing page with information about the property. It's just not a multiple listing service on our own company listings, because the broker is really the one that owns the listing. On your kind of company website, you can put compensation. The only place you can't put it is in the multiple listing service. Okay.
Or even like what you said, like seller can, or what you said, with an acceptable offer, seller agrees to provide a concession, text for details.
Yeah, that's it. And they can text the staff, and then we just text them back and let them know what it is.
2%. Yeah, let them know what it is right there.
Hey, did you guys see that face Jose just did? That was so cool. He was like,
"That's so simple." It's
so simple. Like we're making this out to be this huge thing. Now, the last rule is that if you work with a buyer, you're going to have a buyer brokerage agreement signed. Now, what I find really interesting about this one, Jose, is I've been asking, agents, throughout this week as we're having all these conversations, which are dominated by this kind of quelling people's concerns and kind of anxiousness or tension, is let me ask you a question. Would you ever take a listing without a listing agreement? And they're like, of course not. Like it's the most ridiculous thing that they could, somebody could possibly say. And I'm like, well, why? Because it's mandatory. So the only reason that we have not been getting buyer brokerage agreements signed is because it wasn't mandatory. Now it'll be mandatory. So just like when you go on a listing presentation, you go over, you have a formal presentation, hopefully you're not winging it. You demonstrate the value that you're going to add in your products and services, and then you let them know what the professional fee is, and then you negotiate, right? Well, this is no different. You're just going to have to do it on the buy side. Okay. So those are the 5 rule changes, proposed rule changes, because remember, has to go into effect in July. And I know if we look at all the media from agents, a lot of it is emotional. It's not actually logical and rational. If you look at kind of the formal media, a lot of it is uninformed, where they're like, that's it. There's no more 6%. I'm like, hey guys, just so you guys are clear, right now, without these rule changes, somebody in my market's doing a flat fee listing. Somebody in my market lists for 1%. Somebody in the market is running around telling people they'll do it at a discount fee. Like
somebody took a 6% listing as well, too.
Exactly. So there's always options. And you know what I've been telling people, Jose? It's like, hey, when you go on a plane, do you have options and choices? It's like, well, what do you mean? Well, you could sit in the back and you could pay the cheapest amount, correct? Yeah. Or you could get an aisle seat. It's a few more bucks. Or you could sit in one of those seats that are close to the exit so you have more legroom. Or you can sit up front. Nobody freaks out about that. Everybody is very clear, right? And then you know what I said to somebody, Jose? I was like, hey, tell me this. Have you ever been on a plane and first class hasn't been full? And they were like, no. I'm like, even though they have the cheaper seats in the back? Yeah. Why? Because some people don't want to sit back there and they're willing to pay more money to sit up front. Okay.
Yeah. The other thing, I think, as real estate agents, we have to remember that it's not the strongest, the smartest real estate agents that survive, or not that survive, that thrive. It's the ones that are able to adapt. So through our industry, there's been very few top producers that basically produce in every single market. The top producers that produce in every single market are the ones that are able to adapt. So like, for example, during the bank REO, foreclosure REO days, some of the top producers got an REO account, others didn't. When the REO accounts ran out, the top producers switched to traditional buyers and sellers, and some of them didn't. and you notice that trend. So it's not really like change happening. To be very transparent, I remember when COVID hit, and in Ventura County, they put a stipulation that you couldn't show property. So imagine selling a property where you could not show property. So I remember at that point, I'm like, look, if the market's going to crash, I'm not going down with it. And that forced creativity. And it's mainly like just changing strategies and having the right attitude and mindset towards it. So at that point, right before that, we had bought a 3D tour camera. We're like, hey, look, if we're not allowed to show the property, we're basically making all of our showings via 3D tour for that period of 2 to 3 weeks where we were not essential workers. To me, that was more scary than something like this, because I was like, oh my God, if you can't show properties, how are you going to be able to do it? Yet people adapted. People adapted to those times. Hey, some clients didn't want to meet, you adapted to Zoom. So it's just about adaptation. And today we're going to be giving you whatever we feel would be the right skills to be able to adapt to that. That's all exactly it is.
That's all it is. And what I'm aware of is if you want to be in business, okay, business is a infinite game. It is not finite, meaning that it is constantly evolving and constantly changing. If you want to play for an extended period of time, I have to be willing and able to constantly be changing and adapting to my external circumstances and innovate as things change. So a perfect example, just like Jose was saying, when he went through that in 2020 to 2021, I was selling real estate in 2006 and 2008. The financial collapse happens, explosion of REOs, foreclosure short sales. I chose not to participate in that. Also an explosion of expireds. I grew my business up to 100 transactions a year. But then what happened is the marketplace got good. And what happens to expireds? They shrink. I had to pivot. I pivoted to a different source, which was probates and estates. That became 50% of my business, went all the way up to 200 deals. Then what happens is these online lead providers become a thing. And then we did a bunch of transactions with them. So it's constantly pivoting and adapting to external circumstances, right? And I think that things are changing in our current kind of world and society, just in general, so fast with technology and everything, that there's two skills that are really, really valuable. Number one is the ability to learn things very, very quickly, or proximity to people who can learn them very quickly. And then number two, a willingness to change your mind. Because money has an addictive quality. So because of it, we get addicted to the way that we receive it. So we get so like, oh man, like this is the way that I receive money. So anything that's perceived to be a change is a threat to that security. When in fact, your real security comes from trusting yourself that you'll figure it out. Right? Yeah. And by adapting. So all of this is good. We're clear on the everybody clear on the changes? Everybody clear on the changes here? Everybody? Okay, good. So now what we're going to do is now we're going to have a conversation about specifically how you need to be augmenting what you're saying and your approach, because I want you guys to be clear. This business, what we do doesn't change based on external circumstances. How we do it and at how much of it we do it is what changes. So in other words, when the marketplace is great, I maybe only need to make, 10, 12 contacts a day, 15 contacts a day to hit my goals and objectives. When it's not great, the volume's going to have to change. So what I do doesn't change, but how much of it I do and how I do it changes. So if the marketplace is rising very fast and quick, how I present price is going to be different in a marketplace that's stagnant or going in the other direction. Okay. So what this conversation is going to be about, you're still going to present. How you present is what needs to be augmented or evolved. Okay.
So the way that it's come up for me, if we just start off with the no compensation on the MLS, I've been on 2 listing appointments and the sellers have said, hey, I heard about this thing, like this change or this lawsuit. Can you tell me a little bit about that, basically? And the way that I responded was simply just, okay, so that is a really good question. There was a change so the way that, let me retract. So the MLS no longer allows us to offer buyer compensation on the MLS. That doesn't mean that you can't offer out a buyer's commission. It just means that we're no longer allowed to advertise. Now, in our conversations in the past, as I've mentioned to you, our commission is 100% negotiable. We've always been transparent about that. Basically, we're just no longer allowed to market on the MLS, we could still offer compensation, basically, is the way that I've kind of just said it.
Yeah.
And then that's it, basically.
And then that's it, and you move forward. So to put that in like exactly what Jose's saying, and we can kind of walk through it. So I propose that one of the things that are going to happen is we're going to have different forms of representation for different forms of compensation.
It bites agents in the you know what all the time because I see it in litigation. There's so many lawsuits that we file or have to defend because of an ambiguity in the contract that the agent drafted. I had one where the agent said, you know, don't worry about that. The seller didn't disclose it. They're 100% liable. And turns out that wasn't something the seller had to disclose. And that was bad legal advice. Forcing the communication to be different on the front end with the client is going to be a really good thing in all of this.
You know, people are like, well, you know, like first time home buyers, it's going to be harder for them, you know, to like buy a home now and this and that. And, you know, I find that super interesting as well, because I'm aware that there has definitely been a very hard push, concerted, intentional propaganda, if you even will, for a long time about owning a home and that it's an investment and that sort of thing. And really, when you do the math on it, like it's not actually a good investment. It is a forced savings account, though. And, you know, I say collectively, like as a society, are notoriously not good at saving. We're good at consuming. So owning a home forces you to save money. And for most people, the vast majority of their net worth is tied up in the equity in their home. So I understand like wanting people to do that. I think we've lowered the barrier so low to do it. Like everybody should do it. You know what I mean? Where it borderlines on financial like irresponsibility, because, you know, I'm sure you see at closings all the time, like people don't even have like $2,000 if something comes up and you're like, dude, you probably shouldn't buy a house. Like that's not. So I think if people have to save more, if people have to, you know, postpone purchasing, like it's okay to like, you know, kind of sacrifice to get something that you want over time. I don't think that that's bad. What is your perspective on that?
So I 100% agree with you on that. However, I do think, I mean, in this world and especially in this country with the, you know, materialism and consumerism, I don't think that that is going to change because of this. I think that people are going to still try to find a way to stretch themselves to get the biggest house they can afford and, you know, with still have the nice car and the this and the that. Like that's just our culture. And I don't see that shifting much at all. Although from a financial perspective, it absolutely should shift. And I say that because, you know, this is going to spur and create different, you know, AI technology type companies. And I've seen lawyers that are like, I'm going to capitalize on this and I'm going to do a flat fee for the transaction, or I'm going to do a 1% for the transaction so that they can use me. I mean, there's going to be all of these other options that are going to start popping up that is going to allow people, I think, to, you know, to still get into these homes. And I mean, at the end of the day, I still think it makes a lot of sense in most cases for the seller to offer compensation to a buyer's agent. Like I really do. There's so many ways to maintain the seller's kind of net bottom line while providing compensation to an agent so that they know both sides are well represented, that I think it still makes sense to, you know, for sellers to do that.
Instead of defending, which I've seen a lot of stuff from agents, like, oh, you know, I work all these hours and don't you know who I am? And I got to deal with all these crazy people. And I'm like, I don't know why you think that's a good idea to be doing, saying that like in media. But like, instead of defending, it should be educating on the economics and the advantages and disadvantages. So what I've been kind of coaching agents on is like, you know, now that we've come to an agreement, let's say at a listing presentation, I'm listing your home. Now that we've come to agreement in terms of products and service, I'm going to be providing in the professional fee for me to do that, whatever that percentage is or whatever we agreed to. Now it's time to have a conversation about compensation to a buyer and a buyer's agent and the advantages and disadvantages of providing that compensation. So we'll go over the options that you have and whatever you decide, I'm going to support you 100%. Fair enough? And they're like, sure. So I'm curious, have you heard, you know, some of this news with like NAR and stuff? And they're like, well, yeah. And then you take their temperature. What have you heard? Instead of verbally vomiting, instead of like, like, here's how I'm pontificating, like, what have you heard? Well, I heard something like, I mean, do I have to offer compensation? It's like, well, yeah, I know it's a little bit confusing, right? Because you're getting all this stuff from the media and I don't know about you, but like it's very difficult for me in other topics to figure out what's actually true or not. And there's two rule changes that really actually affect you at all as a seller. So I'd like to review them with you so you're clear on them. Would that be okay? Well, yeah. Well, the first one is that we're no longer able to make an offer of compensation in the multiple listing service. We still can make an offer of compensation, just not there. The second is that if a buyer's agent is working with a buyer, they need to enter into an agreement and be clear on the compensation and how that works. Make sense? They're like, yeah. So the professional fee is in fact a tool that we use to market the property. Can I explain to you what I mean? Well, yeah. Well, let's imagine, Kristen, there was you and your significant other, you guys are purchasing a property, and there are 10 properties that you want to look at within a 5-mile radius of your geographic area you want to be. And 7 of them are offering out compensation to your buyer's agent in the form of a concession or a percentage of an agreed upon purchase and sales price. And 3 of them are offering out nothing. As a buyer, which properties do you think you would instruct your agent to show you first? One's offering compensation to your agent or one's offering nothing? And then, and they'd be like, well, yeah, I mean, one's offering compensation. And then you tie it down by saying, why is that? Because if I can have it covered, like I won't have to pay for it. Exactly. So just by you saying that demonstrates that you recognize the professional fee is in fact a tool that we use to market the property. So now we can review the different options that you have. And again, whatever you decide, I'll support you. Fair enough? Yeah. Well, the first option is we offer out nothing. Now, in doing so, as you just shared with me, we could end up affecting showings, which ultimately affects how much you can get. Now, you do want to net the most, don't you, Kristen? Yes. Okay. You also shared with me you guys want to, make this sale happen in the next 120 days, which means we need to be under contract in the next 60 because it takes like 45, 60 days to close. So what would happen on the outside chance if we were still sitting here 120 days from now and it wasn't sold? You look at your house, that would be terrible, honey. We can't do that. Yep. So the other issue with offering out nothing is that it usually takes longer. So it really seems like based on what your goals are to net the most and do it in 60 days, that option wouldn't work for you, would it? Nope. Great. Second option is we can offer out a concession of some sort, right? Because we're still allowed to do that in the multiple listing service. And the idea behind that is that the concession can go towards the compensation of, the buyer's agent, or it can go towards the buyer's closing costs, which would free up capital for them to be able to pay their buyer's agent. And what we're seeing as we kind of deal with this real time, as it's working out in this price point, somewhere around $10,000, $12,000. The third option that we have at our disposal is what we've been doing for the last, 50 years, is that we offer out a percentage of the agreed upon purchase and sales price with an acceptable offer. And in doing so, we broaden the exposure the most, which increases the chances that we'll get the most in the quickest amount of time. So here's my question to you guys. Based on what you're looking to accomplish and why, based on the time frame you'd like to make this happen in, which one of those two options do you think would serve you and your family best? And then shut up. And the vast majority of them will be like, well, honey, we really got to sell. Like, let's do like a percentage. You're like, okay, great. What were you guys thinking? And then you come to an agreement and you're done.
Exactly. And I think that it's an interesting kind of question that's been posed in light of all of this NAR settlement talk is, should a listing agent be kind of pre-negotiating that compensation amount that's going to be offered to a buyer's agent? And I 100% agree with kind of the presentation you just gave. I think that would be extremely effective. But I think another kind of option that would be interesting is you're sitting down with your seller and you say, you're going to pay me whatever it is, 3%. That's my professional fee. I need to educate you that we may have an offer come where a buyer is going to ask us to pay for all or a portion of their agent's compensation. And we don't know what that buyer has agreed to pay their agent. They could have agreed to pay them 1%, 3%, 5%. We don't know. So to go to your seller and say, hey, I need you to agree to 6%. We're going to offer 3% to the buyer's agent and 3% is going to go to me. I would consider stating, you're going to pay me 3% and you should keep an open mind to any offers that come in that include compensation. We may have offers that come in and don't include any sort of contributing compensation. And then we can have it run the board. So if we're kind of pre-negotiating like, hey, I'm going to need the $10,000 to $12,000 or I'm going to need the 6%, that number could be completely irrelevant because we know that buyer's agents cannot get more than what they've pre-agreed to with their buyer. So if they've already agreed to 2%, that's all they can get. And I mean, that's good news to your seller if they were planning on more, but kind of leaving that open-ended and say like, even if your position right now, Mr. Seller, is I don't want to pay anything to the buyer's agent, my recommendation is that if I get any inquiries asking, what are you offering buyer's agents or are you offering any compensation? The response should be, my seller will consider all reasonable offers. Like make the offer. As long as the numbers work out at the end of the day, how we get there should not matter on the seller side.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And what it makes me think about is like in the commercial world, that's how they've done it forever.
Exactly.
So the buyer's agent calls the listing agent, yo, you guys offering compensation? Whatever, including your offer, they make an LOI, including their compensation. People will pay for access. So if I help a seller self-discover how they need to position a property, so it's competitively positioned in the market where we get multiple offers, the probability that they're going to have to pay like compensation, in my opinion, with a high degree of probability goes down dramatically. Because I've seen people, I'm sure you have, particularly, in various different seasons of the real estate space. I've been selling real estate since 2006. So I saw it then. I saw it in 2020, 2021, people paying 25, 50, 75, 100, removing over ask price, removing appraisal contingencies, removing inspection contingencies. I remember because I was telling my wife, I'm like, this is ridiculous and completely financially irresponsible. Like when I saw people paying that much over and removing like inspection contingencies, I was like, what are people doing? This is complete insanity.
Yeah, we've seen that too. I mean, sight unseen, $50,000 escrow deposits, like anything they could do to be that winning offer. And so the market's also going to dictate that, right? I think it should really be looked at on a case by case basis. Maybe it doesn't always make sense for a seller to offer compensation. In most cases, at least in our market right now, it probably does, but that's going to fluctuate with the market, with inflation, the overall economy, all of those sorts of factors.
I agree. So because I sold real estate in 2007, 8, and 9, like you mean to tell me when there were 20,000 homes for sale in Broward County. Like, you mean to tell me that somebody's not going to pay 9% to get their home sold? 100% they will. It's very much so market dictated. The other thing that it made me think about as we're kind of triangulating ideas is as a listing agent, helping somebody to self-discover that by positioning a property competitively price-wise, it increases the probability not only that we'll get multiple offers and best terms and conditions, but that we won't have to, like, we can save money on the professional fee because we can dictate from a place of strength versus, you get one offer and that's not the same dynamic. So then you can ask a question, be like, well, is that the position that you want to be in? Well, yeah. Okay. So then we have a choice. We can either list it higher and see what happens and then increase the chances that we'll have to pay compensation or extra compensation, or we can position it more competitively in alignment with what buyers and sellers are agreeing or a little bit below, get multiple offers, and therefore be in a situation where we can negotiate from a position of strength, dictate terms and conditions, and perhaps save you some money on the professional fee.
Kind of going back to one of your earlier points, like that's why education is so important. It's less about kind of defending your value and your worth and your years in the business and, how hard you work and how you're going to answer the phone at midnight and all of those sorts of things. It's educating on, here's how this is going to impact your bottom line. Here's if your priority is time, like I need to get this sold by X date because I'm closing on a new construction house or I'm moving out of state or whatever it is, like all of those things should be considered on a case by case basis. And then you respond to it by educating and letting them make the decision exactly how you just laid it out.
I've told people that NAR never had an incentive for there to be less agents. Actually incentivized to have as many as possible.
Right.
Because they get dues, right? So, Charlie Munger said you have to be very careful how you incentivize people because it shapes behavior. So if your intention is to have as many people as possible, what you will do is make the barrier to entry as low as possible. I've always said for a long time, like it would have made sense. Like you can't call yourself an agent unless you do like 20 deals a year. Then you'd be like a junior agent. They have junior associate, like junior, like that's what it should be. But so I guess from your perspective, do you perceive that a lot of agents, because 60 to 80% of them are buyer side heavy, so they're going to have to do a formal presentation demonstrating value. They do not possess the sales skills that I just deployed. They're going to have to ask for money, which they've never had to do, like ever. Like sit down and be like, this is what it is. Like I'm asking you for money. Like, do you see a lot of that agent population just not being able to do that?
I do. So, and I see that for a couple of reasons. So number one, the reason you just stated, in kind of going back to that barrier to entry, like the real estate industry is unique in the sense that the barrier to entry is so low that you can have, stay-at-home moms that want to do this on evenings and weekends. You can have part-timers. You can have people doing it as a side hustle. You can, of course, have the people doing it as a full-time career. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things. But with the level of kind of preparation and education and value proposition that you're going to have to include in that presentation moving forward, I also think that buyer's agents are going to see a hit in the amount of compensation they get per deal. Because of those things combined, I think we are going to see a lot of agents drop out, and that's probably going to be the agents that are more the part-timers, side hustle type of agents.
Jose has technical difficulties just because he's wearing a suit and pants on below, like down below.
I think I'm having some technical difficulties.
I bet you a bunch of money he's not wearing pants. Bunch of money, bro. Drop in the comments if you have gone on some listing appointments and people have been asking you about, the NAR settlement and compensation. People are going to be asking you about it. You do need to be prepared. So that's what we're here doing, is preparing you guys with specifically what to say and how to say it. Not here to pontificate on what we think is going to happen, but what we need to be doing right now. Now, Jose is a listing machine out in the NAR, as they call it. You've gone on a bunch of appointments, and probably like 90% of them have asked you about it, correct?
Yeah, but even then, like I realized that I need to shorten it up. So I was having a conversation with an agent today, and I'm like, look, whenever a different situation or objection comes out, I realize it's something that I need to practice to come up with a response. So it's funny because I was role playing with a guy. Shout out to a guy named Matt Green from Philadelphia, rock solid role play partner. And we started working on some different dialogue as to how to handle it, basically. But I realized that even myself, I was finding myself over explaining how to handle this, basically.
So what were you seeing? Like, what were you doing from an over explanation point?
So from an over explanation point, when they were asked me like what it was, I would just be like, well, look, there's actually one change. The change is that you can't, or not one change. There's a couple of different changes. One of the most important changes is that you can't publicly advertise how much you're offering towards the buyer's agent in terms of compensation. But I wasn't turning it back around in terms of why they should still offer a buyer's compensation. And after the end of role play, what I realized is that the commission is a marketing tool to drive exposure to the property.
That's right. So you were getting lost in kind of
the details of
the details
what was going on,
instead of saying something like, well, now that we've come to an agreement as far as what I'm going to be doing for you, the representation, and what I'm going to be compensated to do that. Now we're going to have a conversation about compensating the buyer's agent in the form of a percentage of an agreed upon purchase sales agreement, or in the form of a concession, and the advantages and disadvantages of doing so. Because I am sure, Jose, you have heard some of the news with regards to this NAR settlement. Have you heard anything about it? Yeah. So my intention in this moment is really just to go over that. And that way you can decide what you feel is best. Whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%. Now, I want to be clear that the professional fee is in fact a tool that we use to market the property. Can I explain to you what I mean? So that's how you can get to it.
That's how you bridge it, basically, right there.
You get to it really fast. And then they're like, well, what do you mean? Well, let's say that, there are 25 properties available for sale between $600,000 and $700,000 that are within a 5-mile radius of where we're sitting. And 20 of them are offering out some form of compensation to the buyer's agent, and 5 of them are offering out nothing. as a full-time commission-based salesperson, which properties do you think you'd be more inclined to show and sell? And then be quiet. And people are intelligent, bro. They're gonna be like, well, yeah, I mean, the ones that are offering out compensation. Exactly. Now, here's where you can drill it down and anchor it. You say, why is that? Get them to tell you. So what Jose is doing, which is awesome, this is real time, and he's one of the best agents in the country, guys. Okay? Over $2 million in gross commission income. And he's realizing in 2023, as he's doing it, he's like, wait a minute, I'm talking too much. Like, I need to the economy of words, and how can I ask questions to help me to get there faster?
And overcomplicating it as well, too. But I noticed that. But if you think about it, like how many times are we doing this by not learning what to say? So the only adjustment that I would say to what you just said, it's funny because Matt came up with the same exact thing. He's like, let's pretend that there's 10 houses available for sale and 8 of them are willing to pay a commission, and then 2 of them are not. Now, if you were a buyer, knowing that if the seller doesn't pay a commission, you're going to be responsible for that commission, meaning like you're going to be paying the commission, which one of those 10 houses would you want to see first? So almost like not even making it about the agent, making it about the buyer. Like, hey, like if the responsibility is now on the buyer to pay the commission, and there's 8 of the houses offering a concession and 2 of them are not, like as a buyer, like which ones are you going to tell your agent, hey, show me these houses? So it's almost like the buyers are going to be shopping for the ones that are offering a commission. When he said that, it was like,
boom. So what I'm aware of is what I did was very good. That's better. So by positioning it and saying, like, if you were a buyer and there were 20 properties that were going to give you money to compensate your agent, and there were 5 that were not going to offer anything, and you would be responsible for the compensation. Honestly, everything after the word honestly has to be honest. Which properties do you think you would instruct your agent that you want to see? And then be quiet.
Yeah.
And then they'll be like, well,
you have to come up with an extra $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, you know?
Mm-hmm.
As a buyer, potentially.
Yeah. And then when they say, well, yeah, probably the ones offering compensation, and then do what I said, which is, well, why is that? And then they'll tell you, and they'll kind of, you got it. And you're like, yeah. So just by you saying that demonstrates that you're beginning to recognize that the professional fee and what we offer out in compensation is in fact a tool that we use to market the home.
100%.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go over the options that you have at your disposal in terms of that compensation, because I want you to be clear. So that way you can decide what makes the most sense for you and your family based on the time frame you'd like to make this happen in and your goals and objectives. Does that sound okay? Yeah. And I want to be clear as well, Jose, whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%. Fair enough?
And then what I was going to say, if you guys want to see Matt Green on this podcast or on this basic in an episode, I can talk to him. Comment down below. I'm happy to invite him on. Very skilled agent out of Philadelphia.
I love Green, bro. He's dope. And he's one of the only, it's interesting. And I'll just give him a little kind of big up is that, I would have a lot of people ask me to role play. And the majority of those role plays was me teaching people. Matt was one of the only people that I would role play with that I would actually learn from.
That you would actually learn from. And that's the same way that I feel about Matt, that he's actually one of the people that I learn from, that I take notes. So this is kind of like, I wrote some notes, and then one of the things is like, okay, well, are sellers still going to be offering a compensation to buyer's agents? And what Matt and I came up with is like, well, look, that's a really good question. Sellers who want the highest price and the most exposure are still likely going to offer some sort of incentive for the buyers to view the home. Let's think about it this way. Let's say that there's 10 homes out available for sale. And let's say that 8 of the sellers are willing to pay some sort of compensation or some sort of concession to the buyers. Let's pretend that there's 10 homes available for sale, and let's say that 8 of them are willing to pay some sort of compensation or commission to the buyers or even their agents. And let's say that 2 of them are willing to pay nothing. If you were a buyer, knowing that if the seller does not offer some sort of compensation, you're going to be responsible for paying your own agent, like honestly, like which one of those 10 houses would you be wanting to see first and why, basically? And then I wrote down some additional notes. I wrote down, like, for example, do you ever remember a time where maybe the marketplace wasn't as vibrant and sellers were actually paying out a bonus to buyers agents to sell their property? Do you ever remember a time where, like, instead of offering 2%, people were offering 2.5% or 3% or even 3.5%, or even we'll pay you $5,000 on top of this if you bring us a buyer? Why do you think that sellers were willing to do that?
Exactly. And then what you could do is you could either say it from sellers. And here's what I love about this, guys. I want everybody on this call
basically masterminding right now.
And what I want everybody on this call to recognize is that if you are smart, hardworking, and ambitious, and you have proximity to the right people, you can come up with solutions to anything. Okay?
And that's what we're doing right now.
And that's what we're doing right now. So what just came up for me is you could say, like, hey, I don't know if you ever noticed, like, new construction properties, when the marketplace is really, really kind of white hot, they offer out very less compensation or concessions to you as a buyer. Have you ever noticed that? And they're like, well, yeah. And then if things slow down a little bit, have you ever noticed they give tremendous concessions? Like, they're willing to put in the kitchen, they'll pay your closing costs, all that. Then be quiet. And they're like, well, yeah, I guess they do that. And then it's like, well, why do you think they do that? Well, I guess it incentivizes me to purchase that one versus something else. Exactly. And just by you saying that demonstrates that you're beginning to recognize that the professional fee is in fact a tool that we use to market the home. Does that make sense to you? Yes, it does. Okay, so with that being the case, we have a couple options at our disposal. I'd like to review them with you so you can decide how you wish to proceed. Whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%. Fair enough? Yeah, and then go over the options.
Boom, right there. Yep. I think that's good. The great news is that because buyers, yeah. And then here's some final thoughts that he actually came up with. He's like, well, look, here's the good news about this. The good news about this is that because buyers are now somewhat responsible for some sort of the commission, even though you're offering a commission, that doesn't mean that you are obligated to pay for it, meaning that it becomes 100% negotiable, just depending on whatever offers we receive, basically.
Yeah. So, and I think that's interesting too, because we'll see real time. I don't know if I would say the word like obligated.
Yeah.
I would be like, we have an option. And one of those options is that we don't offer compensation. Now, I just want you to think about the ramifications of doing that and the pros and cons. So that way you're completely clear on if that makes the most sense for you and your family. And if it does, great, we'll do it. If not, then we may need to consider a different option. Does that sound fair? Yeah. And then get into, so the pro, I'm imagining, is that what you're thinking is that, oh, that means I'm going to net more money, right? Because I'm not obligated to pay compensation on the other, or I'm not, I even said it. So I'm not going to offer compensation on the other side. And yeah, I can see logically how you would think that would make sense. Can I share with you what would concern me for you and your family if you chose that approach, and how long it takes to get the home sold and how much we get? Well, sure. What do you mean? Now, it's critical there that I say, can I share with you what would concern me for you and your family? Because if I say, can I share with you what would concern me? You don't care. But if I say Jose and, Mariela and the family and how much you get and how long it takes, he's like, what? I'm paying attention now. Right? So, so the professional fee is a tool that we use to market the home. And what I mean by that is the following, and here's how we're bridging everything together. This is awesome in real time. Let's imagine for a moment you're a buyer and you're looking at, 10 properties that fit your criteria and your price point. 7 of them are offering out compensation towards your agent. 3 of them are offering out nothing, and you're going to be responsible for the compensation. I mean, honestly, as a buyer, which properties do you think you would instruct your agent that you want to go see and potentially buy? Well, those other ones. And then follow that up with, why is that? Well, because I know I'm not going to have to pay. Exactly. So just by you saying that demonstrates that it is in fact a tool. Now, I'm wondering if we were going to maximize value and get you as much as we possibly can, which is what you want, isn't it? Yes. Do you think we'll do that by limiting the exposure or by broadening the exposure and showing it to as many people as possible? Well, probably broadening it. And why is that? Well, the more people that look at it, the more money we'll make. Exactly. So when you put those two together, what we realize is that by offering out some form of compensation, we ensure that we show it to as many people as possible. We get you the most amount we could possibly get in the quickest amount of time, because you did share with me, Jose, that the goal and objective is to have this home sold in the next 120 days. Is that still the case, or has that changed?
No.
Nope, still the case. Well, what that means, I was thinking about this in preparation for us connecting. And what I was realizing is that we have to be under contract, Jose, in the next 45 to 60 days. And that buyer has to be like rock solid, right? Because it takes another 45 to 60 days, depending on financing. And my concern is if we were still here 120 days from now and the home wasn't sold, I mean, what would that mean for you and your family if that happened? I'm like, oh man, that's terrible. We don't want to do that. Okay. So then does it seem like offering no compensation to the other side? Does that seem like it would actually serve you in the long run? Well, probably not. Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. Now, notice, I didn't verbally vomit and pontificate and tell them that it's not a good idea and you shouldn't do that. I skillfully ask questions to get them to tell me, because they're never going to argue with their own information. They will always argue with you, though.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I agree with you 100% on that. Now, the only devil's advocate that I'm going to play on that, you're going to get like some sellers that are like, well, I would look at the houses that are that I like the most versus the ones that are offering the commission. And if they say that, you can be like, well, I understand where you're coming from. And obviously I get that point, or I understand where you're coming from. Now, if you did like one of those houses that aren't offering a compensation, would you make a full price offer, or would you try to offer a little bit less to compensate for the fact that you're having to pay for your own agent's commission?
Love it.
If you're not good at asking people for money, which I can't imagine anyone in this world is not good at that, but you're going to be you're going to be crippled on the buyer side, because you're just going to, and there are agents that make their living just going, they feel more comfortable working with buyers, and they're like, oh, I like working with buyers. It's because they are not good at sitting down with somebody, demonstrating value, and commanding to get paid. So big picture is that you just need to have this mindset. I'm just going to list buyers, and if you don't have a buyer process, think of like Aaron, who's the, well, I'll ask you, Aaron. So, or I'll even give my own example. The listing process that we have from the moment we generate a lead to the call, to booking the consultation, to sending out a pre-list packet, to sending brownies, to the listing packet, the process at the home, every step is choreographed. We give our agents very little flexibility for the most part on how to run a listing consultation that we know will give us as team leaders the conversion rates that we want. Compare that, like the very best listing process imaginable, the Ritz-Carlton of a listing process. Compare that to how you run your buyer business. And if you don't have any kind of buyer process or buyer presentation or buyer packets or buyer consultation, or you don't meet with buyers before you show them homes, then you have the awesome part about this is you have 3.5, 4 months until this is going to be in play here. Some MLSs, some agents are already going out and running with this and putting zeros in the MLS. So you definitely have some of that. So you need to get after this pretty quickly. I will say, yeah, so to Gloria's question, on our Tuesday, we're actually going to be going through this on Tuesday, April 9th on our production mastermind. So you guys are all in Real Estate B School powered by EXP, obviously, because Aaron, we're business partners. On that call, it's productionmastermind.com. It's 12 p.m. Eastern on April 9th. We're going to do an update on the settlement, but we're also going to be going through the exact scripts you'll use on the buyer side, and we're going to give you a copy of the presentation that you can edit and you can run with. But it just comes down to that. We never took out a buyer. We never used the home as leverage to start a relationship with a buyer. So a lot of agents will just take a sign call and they'll meet the buyer at the home. that goes away now. Now we actually have to show enough value to get them to meet with us before we show them the property. We can't dangle opening the door out there as leverage to get in front of a buyer. And I haven't done that in my whole career. So I was like super lucky. My first coach in the business, Craig Proctor, taught me how to present to buyers, sign them to a loyalty agreement before I showed a single home. So that's going to be how the business changes. If you have no collateral on the buyer side, like you don't have a buyer guide or a buyer roadmap or a buyer presentation, we'll be giving you all of those. Well, you guys have access to them now, actually, through your real estate B School toolbox, but we'll be walking through them on April 9th. And that's it. I wish it was more complicated than that, but you have to be able to present to a buyer and confidently tell them, yeah, you're looking in the $600,000 range, and I charge 3% plus a $935 transaction fee due at closing. And go ahead and sign here, sign here. If you come across a FSBO, if you come across new construction, here are my, you have your process and you stick to it. I actually charge 3.5% to buyers and a transaction fee my first year in the business. And there was either a deficiency that the seller was willing to pay. There was always a deficiency, and either the seller paid it or the buyer paid it. But I got paid that, anywhere from 0.5% to 1% deficiency. And I just had a form that when I was writing an offer with a buyer, we would go through all the particulars of the offer, and then we would come down to commissions, and I would know if there's a deficiency or not, and we would write that deficiency in there. Actually, I'm gonna show you that one. This one. So you guys will need tactical, like actual tools. I don't think I can. Let me see if I can share my screen. So it's a really easy. So this is something I would have when I was working with buyers, and when we get ready to offer on a property, we just walk through this. What's the offer price, the address, the earnest money, additional, what's our due diligence date, what kind of closing date do you want, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, any personal property in the home that you guys like, what kind of loan are we going to be putting together? Mr. And Mrs. Buyer, on this property, they're offering 2.5%. You can recall from our buyer agency agreement, we charge 3%, so there's a 0.5% commission deficiency. We're going to go ahead and ask the seller for that. Then our $935 transaction fee. Are there any other additional closing costs that you want covered? So the total closing costs we're going to have covered here are, $14,500. We're going to go ahead and ask for the warranty. Is there anything additional that we need to include in the offer? And so we're going to give you guys tools that you can use that are going to be in your buyer packets and in your toolkit, so you can confidently navigate all of this. The only difference here is it remains to be. I gather that most MLSs, and I know EXP is going to likely have a one-page addendum to offers that basically lets that agent know that this offer is subject to X compensation for buyer agent. So that's something that there was a good Aaron, I don't know if you saw the it's probably worth sharing. It was Steve Murray on Housing Wire. Did you see that one, Aaron?
Mm-mm.
It was pretty good because it's not a whole bunch of like you can go down a rabbit hole on YouTube on this stuff, but that one was pretty good, and I think that was something that he was contemplating happening.
I'm going to drop it in the chat.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it. You just need a process. You just need to be confident around your services. We're going to go through. You guys already have access to, this editable template. So you need to even relook at your buyer consultation. Do you have an actual process, right? Do you have a buyer loyalty agreement? Do you have, do you offer your buyers a cancellation guarantee? That's what we always did. It works awesome. So you guys already have access to all of this, but we'll be rolling you through it as it relates specifically to this this change. And the mindset around this, I think, is more important than anything else. And I know you guys cover mindset all the time in this group, so I'm actually not worried about this group. I think you guys are going to take your unfair share of what's out there. Most agents won't be able to navigate this. So most agents that do a lot of buyer business will not be able to navigate this. And so there's a ton of opportunity. But just look to your buyer process. The mindset is that you need to have before you go show them a home, everything needs to be highly coordinated where they're like, holy crap, like I can't believe all of this is available to me as a buyer. Now they're gonna pay for it, where we're gonna ask the seller for it. So there will be times where they don't have money and the seller's not offering a concession, and there's a competing offer that has no agent associated with it, potentially. But that's not different now. It's not that different now, right? So anyway, that's really all I have to cover. Ricardo, you got a question?
I think I did, but I don't know if you answered it or maybe I just forgot it. I think I have a lot of questions, man.
Let's go, Ricardo.
Well,
let's go.
Bro, because
yes.
it's just so much. I'm trying to figure out how am I going to negotiate this and how am I going to do this on the listing side. I mean, I've already had
I want you to be
seller
really.
do the
I want you to be
exact
really.
same conversation.
I'm gonna interrupt you. So I want you to be really, really clear, Ricardo.
Oh,
This is not different than what you already do. You go in, you do a formal presentation, you tell them what you're going to do, products and services wise. You negotiate with them a professional fee. You're already doing this.
Ricardo, let me hear you kind of articulate it. And I'm normally like Aaron, so I'm normally like, Ricardo, suck it up. This is what you already do. But I want to hear it in your words. What's kind of getting confused in your head?
It's actually not. I had a seller that I just listed on Friday, and he brought this exact same thing up. And so the way I handled it was exactly how Aaron and Jose teach it in terms of like a professional fee. Like the average agent in across the country selling about 4 or 5 homes a year. And because inventory is so low, sales are down last year and this year. And so the average agent is probably selling 1 to 2, if they're lucky, 3 homes. So if we have similar competing properties on the market, some are offering 2% to 3%. And this agent knows that this might be their only, one of 3 buyers that they're going to be representing this year. They don't have control over what they see, but they definitely have influence over what they choose. And they can definitely push to have their clients compete to make over asking price offers, meaning you're going to get 2, 3, 4% over the asking price. And that may be the case because that's what we're seeing today. So I know it looks like a lot up front. However, on the back end, you're definitely going to make it up. So I guess my question to you, Mr. Seller, is how much do you want to pay, the buyer's agent? And so he agreed to pay a commission, and that kind of just wiped it away.
Right.
So
Hey, are you ready, Ricardo? You ready? Ta-da.
Ta-da. I guess my question,
bro. Ta-da. Like that's
my
it.
question is, I have like 3 or 4 listings that are coming soon in a few months. I've already got them like inked. They're going to be on the market soon. And my question, because you mentioned that you have agents already preparing for that, do I have to go in there and change things, or can I just keep them?
You can keep them until the rule change goes into effect in July. It hasn't even gone into effect yet.
It hasn't even been approved by the DOJ. So we've got until July legit, and then we don't even know what the ultimate is going to be. So
Correct.
So anything in process right now, I would just leave it, and then it's really not overall going to change, because in my listing presentation anyway, I had a section that talks about our buyer agents network. So we advertise aggressively to buyer agents from other brokerages and my own brokerage. And the tool we use to do that is a co-broke. It's changed a little bit here. You might have heard some of the news around, buyer agency and how they get paid. Used to be we could just put a number in the MLS. Now we have to do it through seller concessions. So we just have to have a conversation around what you want to offer a buyer agent to encourage them to show your property.
Exactly.
And I would just gloss over it. And then you're like, typically it's 2%, 2.5%. You could offer less. I wouldn't advise it, but it's your decision. It's your money.
Yeah, so people are looking to be led. Our job is to lead them. And how you
100%.
present it, if you do it in a matter-of-fact way, they're just gonna be like, oh, okay. And then to add to what Lars is saying, is like, yeah, we'll go over the options that we have at our disposal in terms of concessions and compensation. So that way you can determine what would work best for you and your family. And whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%.
Yeah,
So-
and just so that conversation, it's very interesting. He even brought up, well, what if you double end it?
Right.
And so I made a commission structure and I wrote it in if I'm gonna double end it. So it's almost the exact same thing.
Wait, I'm sorry, say that again. Say it again. What?
It's almost the exact same
Fucking
thing.
say it loud and proud. Call me out by name and say it.
It's almost the exact same thing, just a different path. That's
There
all
you
it
go,
is.
T.
It's almost the exact same thing. And
You know
the-
what
and
it's
the-
like? It's like we're in the woods and we're like, yo, we're going to the mountain. And instead of going this way, we're just going to go this way, but we're going to the same fucking place.
Yeah, I'm even gonna start using like in telling sellers, like the buyer's actually in essence in most cases going to pay for it. Can I explain? And they're going to say how? Well, they're going to be competing. They're probably in most cases, if they're competing, going to give you over the asking price. So in terms of commission you're paying, they're really financing it, and it's coming right back to the buyer's
Hey, and then
agent.
you could look at them and smile and say, doesn't that sound great?
Isn't that what you really want? So my question is this, Lars, do I have to disclose it now? Now that I know this, do I have to disclose these things? Like now, on the contracts that I have
No,
now?
because remember,
And moving-
nothing has been approved. What
Okay.
this is, what we're doing right now, leaders anticipate, everybody else reacts.
Yep.
Leaders anticipate, everybody else reacts. The reason why you see me springing into action, Lars springing into action, Jose doing live streams and talking about it is because to go through this, imagining that you're not going to have to alter what you're doing is immature and egotistical. Like you're going to have to augment the way you present. You're going to have to augment, again, you're going to have to be open to providing options and choices, different representation for different forms of compensation. You're going to have to be more open in terms of like negotiating. So I believe you will still get to the end GCI number. It just may be in various different ways. Welcome back, Novello Nation, to another episode of the Aaron Novello podcast. We have with us a very special human being. He's somebody who's really done everything within the real estate space. Not only did he produce at record kind of volume, very, very high volume in terms of transactions and GCI,